feedback in doing this work. So Anu, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, so this is the team. I also have with me here Randy Madsen, who is the senior software developer on this team, and Peter Moe, the data architect. There are others on this team, so we are also combining with this effort with other efforts we are doing here at Utah, and in line with bioCADDIE's mission and vision. I am the PI, and Julio Faccioli is the co-PI on this this grant. Can you move to the next slide? So in this presentation, we will limit to presenting our proposal. We are still in a very early stage, and we'll go over the background of our work, go over a high-level presentation of OpenFurther, our goals in this proposal, and go through the aims and methods we are planning to use within the aims, its evaluation, and our ideas for future steps. Next slide. So biomedical data inclusive of biomedical research inclusive of clinical trials, observational research, comparative effectiveness, population health, and so on, nowadays require using multiple heterogeneous data and often requires combining this heterogeneous data in order to perform research. We are working on an effort to combine various heterogeneous data in a federation and integration platform, and we found the bioCADDIE mission very interesting, and therefore submitted a grant proposal, and I think we were lucky enough to be awarded one of the grants. Next slide. So every data source embeds within itself syntactic and semantic content that is necessary for data federation or integration, or for that matter, any data repurposing. So, for example, here we have two very simple examples, and hope it conveys the meaning that we are trying to say. So if you look at the left of the screen, there is a screenshot from a table, and it consists of a field called code and a field called code type. When we look at these fields, based on the values, we could say that the first field is related to diagnosis, and based on the type of values, we could say they're ICD-9s based on our prior knowledge. If you look at the code type field, it has two distinct values. One is 1 and the other is second, and we could guess at this being primary and secondary diagnosis. In addition to this, if you were to add the entity from which these two fields were extracted, we could say that the entity was related to diagnosis, and the first field is a code of the diagnosis, and the second field is a code type. Similarly, on the right, we have two examples of two fields in a relational in two relational sources that we have at Utah. One is the Utah Population Database, and the other is our Enterprise Data Warehouse, which is the back end of our EHR. So if you were to federate data across these two sources, we would look at column headers or fields and say that we come up with a match saying that gender and sex are equivalent, and that's one way of moving forward with metadata matching. Next slide. So the current state of art for metadata matching relies a lot on human curations, that we have experts in the domain, terminologists, data architects, software engineers who look at various data artifacts and synthesize the metadata and then map it. This is a lot of work and often is non-scalable to large data implementations, and it limits the realization of the full potential of big data technologies in biomedical sciences. So for example, we use the OpenFurther platform to develop a network called the FIS+ network, which is a data federation aggregation platform for 6 hospitals, pediatric hospitals. These are the numbers of metadata artifacts in terms of field names or column titles and terminology artifacts that needed to be discovered and mapped. All this took a lot of effort from the team, which was based in Utah, and representatives from the 6 hospitals, and took significant amount of time over 2 years. So this is just to give an idea of how much human effort is involved currently in trying to extract the metadata and then use it in our use case of a data federation platform. Next slide. I'll let Randy Madsen, our software developer, to talk about OpenFurther.
So this slide is, hopefully everybody can hear me. So this slide does a general overview of the modules or types of things that are used in OpenFurther. It gives you a context of how it is we use metadata and what we hope to achieve by easing the barriers towards discovery and reuse of metadata from source systems. So if you look on the right, there's different data sources of varying types: environmental, clinical, genomic data. And then there's some implementations for security for those data sources. But the most important part here is the data source adapters. Those data source adapters are specific to each data source, and they mirror the artifacts that are stored in the metadata repository there on the bottom. That metadata repository is a functional component of how we orchestrate queries coming from a canonical model that get translated to one of those data sources, and then we translate back the data coming from those data sources through the data source adapter, leveraging the relationships that are stored in the metadata repository and the content mappings of the concepts in the terminology server, all on the fly, to then aggregate the data together for some computational aspects, whether that be for cohort finding, for finding a unique number of patients within multiple data sets or the union thereof, or taking in the FIS+ model data sources that have different types of semantically organized lab data or microbiology and harmonizing that to an aggregated store. So the federated engine is the big F in the middle. That is what then leverages in each part of that the metadata objects that are derived in terms of a concrete implementation of software, so Java objects, that sort of thing. From there, we help to then leverage more of that stuff with quality analytics, so we can then even learn more about what the data sources have to offer based on the metadata, and then using some metrics of how the data is organized. And the Virgo thing at the top is a on-the-fly matching algorithm for unique patients. Totally separate thing, but does require harmonized demographics and other things to be used within an algorithm to match patients. So all of this platform gives us a context by which we can then evaluate our methods going forward with the bioCADDIE project to say how much of this can we re-leverage and how much of it does actually save us work in our platform. This is our context. I hope that gives you a little bit more of an idea of what it is OpenFurther means to us and how it is we plan to use some of this with our project going forward.
Excellent. Yeah. So coming back to the project, so the goals of our project are to prototype a computational infrastructure that supports a discovery and mapping of metadata artifacts and terminologies to overcome current limitations. As I mentioned previously, to add to onboard a new data source into a federating platform requires a lot of manual curation and expertise. So is there a possibility to automate that process or semi-automate that process depending on the confidence threshold chosen at specific implementations, and thereby cut down the time required in onboarding a new data source? Our computational framework for metadata discovery and mapping will be agnostic to specific algorithms or tools because most of these algorithms are domain specific and also dependent on the data. What it would do is choose a best available solution or solutions based for specific metadata artifacts, and then let the user go forward with a specific algorithm or tool. It will leverage existing components of OpenFurther to manage and integrate and share metadata in structured, non-proprietary formats, and central to that would be the metadata repository, which we will briefly talk on the next slide. Next slide. So aim one of our project is to catalog, benchmark, and evaluate existing metadata discovery and mapping methods and tools that are applicable to clinical, so we are limiting it to clinical, environmental, and genomic data. And we are selecting 3 specific examples. One from FIS+, which we have worked a lot on, environmental data. So currently we are working on a project to federate air quality data with clinical data, and then genomic data, specifically clean water. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we are more presenting our proposal and our ideas at this point of time. We are still early on. This slide is basically giving an overview of what we mean by metadata and types of metadata that includes descriptive, structural, and administrative. Next slide. So what we are planning to do is to use these algorithms or set of algorithms to extract metadata from common sources that embed metadata in some form. This includes relational, NoSQL and EAV databases, spreadsheets, XML messages, web services, software source code, ER specs, DDLs, and unstructured documents, some of which could be data dictionaries like PDFs. Next slide. So what we are planning to do is, in a sense, parallel and similar to what a human expert might try to do. Is when a human is trying to harmonize data from 2 or more sources, what the human expert would do is first try to understand what that specific field means, collect all relevant metadata surrounding that field, and then use it to find potential matches. Our metadata discovery and mapping service would follow a similar approach, which is first discover the metadata and then generate potential matches or a match depending on how each implementation of the system is set to work. Next slide. So metadata discovery and harvesting methods. This list is not exhaustive, but primarily they can be classified as those that are they can be classified primarily as those that are meant for discovering or extracting metadata, and a majority of them actually combine discovery with mapping. And again, we are early in this process, but some of the methods that are being mentioned in literature is there's a system called Mercury, which is being used for earth science. There are other grid-based metadata service literature that talk about metadata discovery in grid architectures. The most common mention and use of metadata discovery is in library cataloging, and another example is software architectures that embed metadata discovery. Next slide. The second step in our approach is to then use the discovered metadata and then map it to metadata that's stored centrally in the metadata repository. And the kinds of elements or artifacts that the metadata matching would use is it would include descriptive artifacts around the for example, if you're looking at a field name, we would also use the data type, rules, constraints, and possible values. And the kind of matching that would be required is lexical, semantic, and statistical matching. The matching that we will do will be at different levels of granularity. It could be elements within and to a complete structures, or the other way to look at it is schemas, instances, elements, structure, and so on. We also will be incorporating schema matching and ontology aligning methods, and our metadata mapping approaches will be very dependent on the kinds of inputs that are available and are being used for every specific domain. So far, the best performing metadata mappers seem to use an hybrid approach of using both descriptive and structural metadata to come up with best matches. Next slide. So I won't go through this whole list, but here are some of the well-known methods used for metadata mapping, and they include similarity, flooding, Artemis, Cupid, COMA, protoplasm, S-match. There are other machine learning approaches, and of late there are some distributed semantic and semantic indexing approaches. Our framework will also include a semantic matching component because apart from using the descriptive and structural parts, we will also need to match field names in the case of a relational model, and we will use existing matchers like MetaMap and so on. Next slide. So central to our framework is the metadata repository, and I'll let Peter to talk about the MDR.
Hi everyone, this is Peter. I'm a data architect at Utah. So this is the conceptual model for the metadata repository that we're using here. It's a highly generalized model where everything that we want to describe is an asset. So if you look in the middle, right in the center of that diagram, the asset is the thing that we want to describe. An asset has a type, a label, description when it's activated, and it can have one or more properties for the asset. All assets belong to a namespace, so we use the namespace to group the assets together. And assets can also have resources, so we usually use the resources to store things like software modules and XML files and such data types. Assets are or can be associated to other assets. And so you see on the right side, there's a left asset and a right asset, and then there's a type. And in the association, there's also properties. So the double circles mean that there can be more than one. So association can have more than one property sets as well. So given this generic model, we can pretty much describe anything that we want. Some of the examples of use cases that we're using it here at Utah is we're storing data models, mappings between data models, administrative information, descriptions of elements, and also like I said, the translation programs themselves. So they're not limited to those things, and you can use it for any asset that you want to describe. And I think that's all I have. Maybe just a side note that the generalization is to a point where things like asset type and association types are also assets themselves. So it's a very flexible model.
Next slide. So aim 2 of our proposed project is to incorporate into OpenFurther a state-of-art prototype to integrate this metadata discovery and mapping tools from aim 1 that support expert views, review, and provide measurements to inform on the uncertainty factor for the mappings. Next slide. So this is a high-level overview of how the service would integrate with OpenFurther. Randy, do you want to speak to it?
Sure. So just like the previous diagram to describe OpenFurther, the most salient points of this particular diagram is how this new service would actually feed in assets to the MDR that Peter just described, and potentially semantic mappings into our terminology server. So discovering and harvesting those particular artifacts are of our most interest to accelerate how we then utilize and reuse data to either federate on the fly, to aggregate as in the FIS+ model for curation of data, and republication of data as a static export, linkage with potential mappings of different types of documents or assets or content that's available on different resources, like PubMed or whatever. So ultimately what this is how do we break this down into components that can be automated to then extract metadata to be reused in part of this functional system we have as our context for evaluating the methods that Ram has talked about.
Next slide. So this is a more deeper look at what we are thinking about the proposed architecture of the metadata discovery and mapping service. So when a metadata source is provided, first the administrative metadata is discovered, followed by structured, descriptive, and semantic metadata using various components of the metadata mapping module, service that includes a metadata module, a semantic module, a similarity module, and a learning module. And all of this will talk to the metadata repository, the terminology server, and the quality analytics framework to provide lookups and also learn from existing mappings. Next slide. So as we mentioned in the aims, our aims will be evaluated with clinical, environmental, and genomic data. Next slide. So what we are expecting out of this is the ability to select a suitable discovery and mapping methodology and providing the results for storage in the metadata repository and terminology server. Automated mappings for less tolerant applications and the option of having domain experts review single or ranked matches that were provided by the metadata service, discovery service. Some future work is to make this platform more robust and provide it either as a part of the federated platform or as a separate standalone for just discovery and management of metadata, adding additional discovery and mapping methods as and when made available, as a platform for authors that where they can submit their methods for metadata discovery and evaluate and then later use it, in real-world applications, and include a learning approach by using previously mapped metadata and terminology in the MDR and the terminology server, along with using similarity measures to provide better mappings and use it for mapping newer data. Next slide. So this is our timeline. I don't think we need to go through this. Next slide. So any questions?
This is Ian for NCI. So I'm interested, you talked about your metadata repository, and you didn't mention ISO 11179 at all, and I'm wondering whether that's a standard that's used for many metadata repositories. Curiously enough, Randy and I were both on a call earlier today, and I'm completely surprised to be on another call about it this afternoon, where we were actually looking at a metadata repository that uses ISO 11179. I'm not committing myself either way as to whether it's a good thing or not, but could you comment on how your metadata repository relates to that, if at all?
Sure, Ian, this is Randy. So, again, hello, this is the second time today. So, originally this metadata repository came from earlier work from one of our data architects that initially started this project. I suppose it was back in 2008 or so,
Actually,
2007.
much more earlier, 2004.
So it predates a little bit, not much, but it doesn't particularly follow the standards. It's a hyper-generalized model that was originally used, I think, for some work on a clinical decision support system, but now has been generalized in this sense, essentially as a way to house any type of asset and any description of that asset as much as possible to support the software that we're using for federation. So it's not, as far as I know, it wasn't built to reference the standard.
But as it's evolved, it's been driven bottom up from user needs, or?
Well, the users in our particular case have been mostly ourselves or some partners where we've been federating the data, and as much as I know, as it is right now, it's largely fit the case. It hasn't really evolved a whole lot.
Yeah, I think that the hyper-generalized conceptual model of implementation has not needed a lot of evolution over time.
So I guess it's kind of, I would put it like this. The architecture was built in such a way that it can be malleable per use case, where a traditional MDR tries to make things to be, I wouldn't say immutable, but stored as is, and then that particular concrete repository, at least the architecture of it, allows that thing to stay persisted in a pristine state, where we're kind of using things on the fly and moving them around and allowing them to be moved about. That's probably the biggest difference.
That's good to hear. I think those are important characteristics.
I believe, I may add this, that the original design, I think, was actually based on, or I should say it was inspired by the Dublin Core standard, but I think that's outdated maybe, but it was meant for semantic web and web resources, describing web resources. But in our case, we just want a generic model to describe anything, including data models. And I think we're using it because it's been working. So that's the reason why we're using it, because it works. At least for us, so far.
Thank you.
So this is Jeffrey Greta, and one question is, once you ingest sort of the information about the metadata and the models, you also have a layer of services where that information can be pulled out of the store.
So yeah, currently the implementation for the MDR sits parallel with the way we deploy our federated query engine services. So it's a bundle that resides on a service bus that calls essentially the repository to get assets and their relationship types, also to retrieve the resources for the translation programs, anything really that's in the data repository. And those services currently right now are wrapped within the FQE deploy. But it could be split out to be a microservice or generalized out to be a standalone service of its own.
So it's a REST service right now. There's a set of REST APIs that we've developed here.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, because the question is, in terms of just looking down the road, in terms of integration, with what's being developed in bioCADDIE would be to get that type of metadata information and then use that, as part of the indexing process as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another side of this is that we really want to, as we learn, this process can help us inform our software development going forward for how and what we need to expose for services that as we ingest content in. So to make the MDR services more robust is our end goal as well.
I mean, the other thing that I think would be a useful connection to explore, I'd like to get a better handle on what you categorize, not now, but a better handle in future onto what you categorize as descriptive metadata versus semantic metadata and structural metadata. But I think probably what you're putting under the heading of structural metadata is something that, with the metadata working group in bioCADDIE, I think has mainly fit into, if I've got it right, I think would mainly fit into the category of descriptive metadata. And there's a wish to look at, how that becomes extensible and what the standards used for as we discover repositories that have additional kinds of metadata, that's an area that needs to head into. But I think what you're describing in terms of structural metadata will be very relevant to that. But I'm assuming there that I understand what you mean by all of those three terms, and that, subject to that, I'd change what I just said.
So on a related note, do you have any documentation that is that might be available to us, so that whatever we are, because we are just in the starting stage, so that we can just align with what bioCADDIE is doing?
So I'm hoping there's someone who can better answer that question, like Susanna or Philippe or Alejandra on the call.
So this is Alejandra here, and yes, so it's all on the links from the bioCADDIE website under Working Group 3, everything related to the metadata work. You will find that there is the .doi in which you can find the first kind of release we did, but we are revising it now on the second phase. So we came up with a model, and now we are revising it in terms of the comments plus the actual ingesters. So I can distribute the links to the main release, or I can send them to Anu for you to have.
That would be great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ram and his team? If not, then we move forward.
Sorry, one quick question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead, Alejandra.
So I see that in the OpenFurther project you have lots of things on GitHub. Is the MDR also there for us to look at the metadata you collect?
So the content isn't there. There is
a demo.
There is a demo. Trying to think of the best way. So the content. All right. So what's on GitHub is essentially some implementation details about the MDR, and then all the software stuff that goes with it. And there's some descriptive stuff with the DDLs for the MDR that's there, along with some of our core canonical model that we use. The content for an implementation that we use isn't on GitHub. There's a demo we have that has an OpenMRS metadata description in MDR and an OMOP v2 implementation, but I think we could post that. It would just be a couple of static files, I think, really. I don't know how helpful that would be, but we could certainly do that as far as maybe you would have the DDL of the MDR and then maybe some seed content where you could look at that if that's helpful.
Okay, yes, thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, we'll make sure that gets on there.
This is Hua Shu from the UT House. I just have a quick question. So all the software tools we describe here or later developed for this prototype, it will be open source, right? So we can actually
that is
with bioCADDIE.
So our goal is to both open source it and also have an open implementation where somebody can submit their own algorithm and test it.
Great.
It's both. So it's we'll have an open instance for testing, and the code will be available along with the further OpenFurther code base or wherever else bioCADDIE wants it.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
Are there any more questions? Okay, if not, we'll move on. So please, as usual, visit the datamed.biocaddie.org website and provide feedback on the new version that we have up there, which is version 0.3. The feedback, we have a feedback button which links directly to the prototype issues repository in GitHub. And I have sent an email to follow up with Chris to add him to the bioCADDIE GitHub organization. And the same is true. I'll send out an email to everybody for the pilot project so that you could generate a GitHub repository on the bioCADDIE and start working there. Jeff and Ian, one of the action items was that we would be sharing the diagram which showed bioCADDIE with Aztec and other repositories and shared that with the code development team.
Yes, just send out the email.
So Jeff's done a much more visually attractive version of it than the one I did, so I'll let him go.
Yeah, so I mean, it was, again, a pass on what Ian had taken a pass on, and Susanna sent a couple comments, but I don't think, I replied to the thread this was on, so let me forward this to the thread so that everyone is on.
Okay.
I will do that. I'll do that right now.
CDT.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, and just an update on the poster the poster abstract for the core development team for the bioCADDIE, not the bioCADDIE, I'm sorry, BD2K all hands meeting. We submitted that last week. I think the submission went through, so Jeff will be presenting the poster. And we also said that we would share the list of planned prototype feature implementations with the bioCADDIE team. We haven't put that up yet in GitHub or in Google Docs, but Yulin has already prepared an Excel spreadsheet which I'll put up in Google Docs under the core development team.
Okay. Yeah. So we have the list of
I know this is Ron. Just a follow-up note. The organizers of the all-hands meeting need to get from you all what rooms you'll need for breakouts, about how many people you think you'll have, and what kinds of AV support you need.
Yeah, right. So just give me a minute, Ron. We will get to that. Because I have that on the agenda actually.
Oh, okay, very good.
So I just wanted to talk briefly about the BD2K all hands meeting demo or proposal. So one of the things I think or some of the things that need to be accomplished before November 12th or 13th is that we have updated indices for the repositories. This is the list of repositories that we were planning, which would be PDB, GeoLinks, BioProject, ArrayExpress, Gemma, and BBGAP.
Far away from all the.
So Jeff, could you please update us?
Yeah, so the data sets are being finalized, so they should be up this week. This was tied into some of the discussions that we had with Ruling. So.
Oh, maybe by the end of this week.
Yep.
Make sure I get all the data sets indexed with the new metadata and sort of test a little bit more next week, so then we are ready for the.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So let's at least for those like 4 gene expression data repository, we want to get that down so we can show people actually different gene expression data set from different repository can be searched in one single place. So I think that's very important to make sure that one was indexed. Is there anyone in your team, Jeff, you think really should contact me or she directly, or it will just be you really?
For the primary person on our side is Barak, who's doing the implementation on the pipeline piece.
Yeah, maybe we can put grading with Barak together to make them get this done. End of this week or early next week. We don't have much time left.
Yeah.
And also, I think before we go in for the demo, we need to have the pilot projects that have already been integrated, implemented on the DataMed server, I guess specifically for Dell. And the idea is also to implement the new design completely. I think we still have the single data set pages that need to be implemented.
Okay.
And Ruling said that it should be possible to group the metadata, or for each data set to group the data in such a way that you are following the working group metadata specification. So this is the wish list. So for usability feedback that we want to collect at the BD2K all hands meeting, I think we need to make a decision on whether we want to collect the feedback as a survey maybe, or whether it should simply be
I think based on what we discussed, we maybe actually prepare a survey form, something like that. Let's do this. So we can talk to driver, talk to car to see. Or it could be, a little bit more extension to what Todd did on the survey, but we need a little bit more feedback, for example, could be something on the feature list as well, or as well as what's their general, like if we do a demo, if this person come in, we ask them to do the demo. After the demo, maybe they can fill up a form and give us some feedback. Let's put a survey form together with Todd, and maybe by next week we should get it ready and send around to get some feedback from the infected individual. Okay.
Also, the plan is to recruit interested users for formal user testing. And this could be either in person or remote. So the next thing that we want to decide for the demo is whether we do the demo in the lobby or whether we do it in a dedicated room. I think if we do it in the lobby, we might get just better traffic. I mean, then we can
Lobby means the poster
session itself and have some.
So, I mean, how is the post session going to be laid out? I mean, is there going to be space?
Yeah, can we ask for like a bigger
So
space?
Ron,
Two desks, we have two computers there, two people sitting there. If that's arrangeable, then maybe we can do in the lobby.
So Ron, do you have any insight into exactly how the layout would be?
Well, I can only speculate. We don't know how many abstracts they got in and how they're going to filter those out. How many of them require demonstrations versus how many of them are just really posters. If you're familiar with the Natcher building, where you enter, there are the staircases that go down to the auditorium and the meeting room. And on that entry level are also the balcony room. But in that hallway, that's where most people set up poster sets. And there's room for, depending on how you lay it out, side or back, you can fit a couple of dozen.
Okay. I think if we can like ask for two poster kind of space and have a desk over there, then we can do it in the lobby. That, like you said, maybe we actually will attract more people instead of separate room, and we will have to point people to that room. Maybe not many people actually going to really go to the room.
But Phil had suggested that possibility, but it's getting to the point now where unless we know that's a reality, I think we're getting to the point where we need to make a firm choice. And there's a risk here, and until I would hear that the logistics for the tables in the lobby and a power supply and a reliable network connection are available. And I have to say, I mean, Phil expresses that wish, but it's for other people to put that in place. And I would want to hear that stuff is in place before we find ourselves in a position that we don't have the resources that are needed. So, Ron, do you think we can get that clarified?
For the resources at the conference.
Say again, Hua?
Well,
who shall we contact? We want to.
Ron.
Sure.
So, I'm a little bit unclear. I think the center's coordinating center itself is doing some of the logistics. So I will find that out.
K-Pace Group coordinating.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that worries me, Ron, because the center coordinating center does not know the ins and outs of the Natcher building at NIH. They're based in UCLA.
No, that's true. I will. What I'll do is I'll contact Firminco and see what she has.
Okay, yeah. If you can put someone in contact with us, then we actually can justify our needs and make sure we get the table, get the space.
Another thought occurred to me that we could ask for a room for a demo, and what we could do is, as people come to the poster, send them right downstairs so there's a live demo going on.
Well, could you just talk a little louder? We're finding it a little hard to hear you.
So, yeah, I'm talking into a microphone rather than the phone. One thing that occurred to me, and this may prove to be impractical as you consider it, is to have the poster, which has the full documentation, on screenshots and whatnot, and then direct people downstairs to a room where there's a full live demo going on, so that you can get sort of waves of people. Let's say the poster session is 2 hours. So let's say that there are potentially 4 demonstration slots, so that there could be 30-minute demonstrations at a time, or alternatively, it could just be rolling. That's just a thought. If you think that might work, we can explore that. If it would be better to have it as people congregate around a table in the poster area, then we can work more definitively on that.
Yeah, at this time, I don't think we actually have this kind of formal, concrete 30-minute demonstration to show. To me, I was originally more thinking about like an informal interaction with users. Come in, try our website, type some of keyword they want to see the results, and kind of then have a little bit of interaction with our team, and then fill a form about some survey questions.
Okay.
That's kind of more kind of informal interaction
Fair
with
enough.
the user.
Then I would wonder about having at least 2 computers, 2 laptops at the poster.
We will bring 2 laptops over there, and we have 2 people, one for each laptop. Actually, will talk to the user. So that way, we actually have more close interaction, and also can ask them a bunch of questions.
Okay, I can factor that into the request.
This is Dawei. I think another suggestion is that it may have a lot of people coming around. I'm not sure like the laptop is visible for people to sit around. And another solution may be like have a projector or something.
Well,
have a
Phil
projector.
Didn't offer that option. We talked about that option previously, and we talked about it in terms of screens rather than a projector. I mean, a projector's not going to work in the...
We can do some projection. I have a small projector I can bring with me.
Well, you can bring it. My only caution there is that the posters that particular corridor, the lobby, backs up against wide open windows, so the daylight is going to come through pretty clearly, and so it might be difficult to get sufficient contact.
If you want to use a screen, the separate room is going to be a better option. But the problem with doing that is you're only going to have one laptop. I mean, if it's in this 2-hour session, my sense of it is that if you have 2 laptops, you'll be able to get 2 or 3 people around each laptop at a time and have a really good interactive discussion with them, rather than something, which is projected to a whole room of people on a screen. But a screen's not going to work in the lobby unless it is. I mean, the only way we can make a screen work in the lobby if it's a plasma or LCD, large LCD screen. And to my knowledge, those aren't available.
More complicated, yeah. I think maybe we'll try with laptop, but because right now the demo, I think it could be short, just a few minutes. They try some keyword search, and we try some show them some functionality. It doesn't have to be very long, and we can finish a couple of people very quickly in a few minutes, move them to fill the survey, then take the next batch of people who are interested. Yeah.
Even if you do at least with one batch of people, say 15 minutes, if we spend with them, I think we'll get quite a bit of good feedback from them, right? And we could do 8 batches or so.
Yeah.
From there was one thing that was suggested of doing a demo of the demo beforehand, and maybe we could do that over the web, and you could run through with Ron, Dawei, myself, or whoever, how you think that conversation might go, that 16-minute conversation might go, and test that out beforehand and modify as needed.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Better to do it with a somewhat sympathetic audience before going live.
Okay. So you mean we set up a meeting to show guide?
to
Yeah,
show
it
you.
doesn't need to be very long before the meeting.
We could do this maybe in next week's meeting.
I don't know if you'll have everything done by then. Maybe the week after?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I'm
do it.
talking about in this regular tech meeting.
Do it as close.
10 minutes, just show what we plan to show, then we can get feedback from all of you.
I would do it as close to the meeting as possible to give you all as much time to prepare.
Okay. We'll try to do maybe the week after next.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. So also, Ron, there were discussions about having a face-to-face meeting with the Links group at the BD2K All Hands.
Well, have you all been in discussions with the Links group?
Not yet. We just talked about, I think Jeff talked to them about the API a little bit, but they
Yeah.
So there are a couple of ways of approaching it. One, if you think you're going to have the need for and benefit from a definitive face-to-face meeting, you can tell us about how many people you'll have. This will be at the breakout. About how many people you'll have, plus what size room you would need, and then what kind of AV you would need, and so on. If it's going to be a smaller meeting with just a few of you, you could conceivably do it over lunch, since there is a sufficient break to allow for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a possibility. And then, yeah.
So we just have to, so this meeting would be like a follow-up to see what's been done or what we want to do in the future, right?
Right.
Yeah, so
my sense of it is that we want to get to some fairly concrete actions with Links, because we've had, or where do you feel you are, Jeff, Anu, why? I mean, is it just a question of establishing contact and saying we want to work together, or is it that we're down to talking about concrete things?
I mean, hopefully we should be talking about concrete things at the AHM. So that would be sort of to lay out sort of the action items over the next 3 to 6 months, potentially.
I mean, my sense of it was that we were at that point.
Yeah.
And you kind of want all right, over lunch you've always got the back of a napkin to scribble on.
well, there is a guest internet, so you can get your computers.
Sorry, Ron, we're still having difficulty hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because there is Wi-Fi in the building for guests, you can sit at lunch over your laptops and pull things up and exchange things right there in live time.
I mean, could a room be booked for a working lunch?
That's possible too. The feedback I'm getting from Soninco is that there needs to be a critical mass of, at least 8 to 12, maybe more people before they'll commit a room. Apparently, there's been a lot of demand from other of the participants for rooms for these larger meetings.
Well, I think we could find 8 at least for one of the smaller rooms at Natcher.
Yeah.
So Ron,
Okay.
it will be 4 of us at the BD2K All Hands meeting from UT Health, plus Jeff, and I'm assuming Ian, you would be joining in on the meeting. I'm Dave as well. And whoever is interested who's there from bioCADDIE can also join in.
And we would hope that I'm blanking on his name right now, but the project.
Avi, you've got to clear it with Avi and his crew
Avi would
that they would be participating. Get a read on that. With regard to NIH staff, clearly Ian, as the science officer, will be highly engaged. The rest of us, since there are going to be so many breakouts going on, several potentially related to bioCADDIE, that we may have to spread ourselves a little.
Okay, so should we get in touch with
What you need to do is get in touch with the links people.
Okay.
Clear with them that they are willing to do this during one of the breakouts. Get a read on how many people you'll have, how many people they'll have, and then you can send that information to me, and I'll see what is available.
All right. That sounds good. I guess we've run out of time, so we'll skip the other part. Maybe we can talk about that next week, and then we'll have we'll run through the demo one the week after, which is much closer to the all-hands meeting. Thank you all for attending the meeting today.
Thank you, Anu.
Okay, thank you, Anu, and everyone.
Okay, bye. Bye.